Hi, and welcome back to the Hmong Woman podcast. So today we're actually going to be sharing with you guys one of our dear Hmong Woman submissions. I want to thank this writer so much for trusting us with your submissions. So if you or anyone else have a dilemma or a story that you would like to share, you can go ahead and fill out our form. It's a Google form, have that submitted, and we'll keep an eye out for that and have it hopefully published on YouTube. So my name is Joshi. I'm a co-host here.
I'm Ariel.
And I'm Emily.
All right, so diving into the story here, this story was submitted from an individual who has a pronoun as he. He's 27 and lives in the US. So the story goes, I guess I would like advice on how to ask your significant other that, hey, I want to marry you, but my dad is out of my life. I don't have cousins to help me do a traditional Hmong wedding. Is that a deal breaker? I'm asking this because I am a Hmong man who has never dated another Hmong woman in my 27 years of life or living because of the fear of not having uncles and cousins to back me up. A little context. My parents got divorced when I was around 12, and I barely saw my dad because I just didn't want to. He wasn't the best dad, but he would always scold us when he finally showed up to family gatherings and embarrassed me in front of my uncles, saying, "Oh, what's his name? He's important. You need to know his name. How are you going to marry someone if you don't know this uncle or that uncle? Your mom can't raise you to be a man." And he would do that in front of everyone. And they all laughed at me. So from there, I just said, I won't marry somebody Hmong. Easy. I left my dad to live my own life, become my own man, and build my own identity and my own individuality. I grew up in South Minneapolis, Minnesota, where it's really diverse, and I've dated a lot of different people, but I never dated Hmong women. But I'm at a stage in my life where I just want to be happy and open to anyone. But I guess what I'm trying to ask is, if I do end up dating somebody Hmong, how do I even tell her, like, I'm uncultured as hell? I don't want a Hmong woman or Hmong wedding. I want a wedding that's about us and only us, where our closest friends and select family can come and celebrate with us. I don't know if that's a deal breaker, but I don't want someone who agrees with me, but her parents don't and exile her. Or her parents are hella traditional and don't like me because I don't have a family to help me and I don't know my uncles. I know marriage is something really far down the road, and it's a if we get there, we'll talk about it. But I want your girls' opinion. If it were you, is it a deal breaker? And if it's not, but your family isn't okay with it, how would you proceed? Thanks. I love the TikToks and pod. You guys are awesome. Let's break this toxic wheel together. Thank you. That was such a nice ending to the struggles you're going through. And then last note that he did put here, he says, I go by Vang. Everyone just calls me by my last name. Thoughts?
First of all,
Ooh, it's about to get spicy, but let's get Ariel.
Yeah. First of all, that's rude as hell when people say, oh, you're not a man if you're raised by your mom. I know plenty of people with single parents who turned out just fine. So I just want to put it out there that, like, I am so sorry you went through that, because I have friends who went through that, and it's just not polite, and people need to keep their thoughts and opinions to themselves. Yep. And it's not like your mom chose to do it, right? You said your dad stepped out. And so I just want to put that out there that, like, people have to step up, and parents have to step up and raise you by themselves. And they sometimes have to take on both roles. And like Emily was saying, like, it doesn't make you any better, any less than people with two parents.
I have a lot to say, but I think I'm going to go backwards. You asked here that if it were me, is it a deal breaker for me? And if it's not, but it is for my family, is that would I be okay with it? How would I proceed? So I think something really unique about my family that I think my parents, even though they are traditional, they are also very empathetic, and they understand everybody's situation is different. And I think at this point, my parents are kind of like, you marry who you marry, and we're going to make it work. And so I know that it's not a deal breaker for me. It's not a deal breaker for my family. And again, it's really based on your family dynamic and how your partner is willing to communicate with their family, and how your partner keeps those boundaries. I think it sounds like to me too that like you are looking to create a relationship with that family, and that's why you don't want that family to have an issue with it. And I think that's valid for you to want to create that family with her family. But you also have to understand that sometimes, even if you really love that person, do you really want to be a part of their family if they are horrible people? But if not having a relationship with your in-laws isn't going to be an issue, and it's not an issue for your partner, then I think, what does that marriage look like between the two of you? And so again, it's really up to you about whether or not you want to have a traditional wedding. And if your partner does, if your partner is like, F it, I don't want to have a traditional wedding, let's just have like this intimate affair with me, you, and our family in our backyard, like do that. But I think it's a conversation to have. It's always just bring it up of what is your expectation if we do get married? Like, do you want a traditional wedding? And if you do, how do you want to go about it? I think, again, key is communication and expectations, right? Setting realistic expectations and then communicating that.
That is very well said. I think to me, it's not a deal breaker because obviously I'm not very traditional, but I know to others it'll be a big deal for some. So I think it's important to say that like you'd be really surprised that people are not going down the traditional wedding side and are leaning sometimes towards more white weddings. And so it really depends on who you get and who you decide to date. But my sister actually just went through this of where, her fiance's family is traditional and our side of the family is now Christian. And so, if they love you enough, they'll respect your decision is what I told my sister. And so right now, because they have both sides of the family that's equally different, it was really hard for them to come to a decision that they don't want to do a traditional wedding and they'd rather do a white wedding. But what matters is that they did that decision together and they came to both of their families as a united front. And so when you're trying to communicate that, as Emily has said, it's really important to come as a united front and making sure that you both are on the same page and that you both are willing to stand up for what you both want in this wedding, this one day that you both will be paying for and that you both will be engaging in.
Yep.
And so to me, one thing that I didn't want to say is when you start dating, I think it's important to figure out if someone wants the same thing as you. And you can be honest, right? You want to make sure that you both have the same things in mind. And this obviously can wait. Like, you don't want to spring it on her on the first date, but you want to make sure you're headed down the same path and you want the same goals. And in the perfect world, you'll find someone who wants almost all the same things as you. And if I were in your shoes, I'd personally tell that person, like, I'm uncultured as hell, basically what you told us today. I don't want a Hmong wedding. I want a wedding that's just about us and for our closest friends and family. And you can ask that person if that's a deal breaker, right? Because some people envision different things for their future, and you really do have to find someone who respects your decision enough to be like, okay, I can't meet you there, but I can meet you in the middle. Because I know a lot of people too who do semi-traditional weddings and then the second half is a modern wedding, right? Mm-hmm. So just be open to the idea that there are women out there who want the same thing as you, and it's not as uncommon as you think.
Yeah, I agree with everything you both said. For me personally, so I come from a very traditional background. I've already been married before, and I went through a traditional Hmong wedding, and I never did an American wedding. Now, none of that was specifically, I was young, so I didn't intend to do my wedding that way. But is it a deal breaker for me moving forward? I have more intentions with where I'm leading my life. It's not a deal breaker, as traditional as I am. And just piggybacking off, I can't even say that. Basically going off of what these ladies have already said is, I think you should have those conversations, early on in a, relationship or in a connection. As Ariel said, probably not on the first date, but I feel once you start to feel like there's a connection here and this is a possibility, I think that's a good time to kind of like slide in those kind of conversations, And it could start with something as easy as like, hey, what's a deal breaker for you? Like, or whatever, just start easy. It doesn't have to be like so harsh and like, so by the way, I'm like incapable of giving you a Hmong wedding if you want that in the future. It doesn't have to be that rigid. Just, make it a conversation, kind of start like, what's a deal breaker for you? Just something I'm thinking about. And you can just slowly go into it and figure out if this is something that she will want in the future. And then you can navigate it from there. And also just exactly what Ariel said here. I think just because you're Hmong doesn't always mean that you want to have a Hmong wedding. I think that if for me, if I love someone and you cannot do the Hmong wedding, I would not be mad about it. I personally would expect a wedding. So we got to go with something. But I also know that there are a lot of people out there who just maybe they love each other, but they don't care for any of that. And so you really got to dig deep and see what this person you're talking to with, what they want, what they envision themselves in. So that's the first piece. And then, sorry, just going over the other questions here. I'm really sorry that you had to experience that with your father, though, and in your family life that led you to feeling that way and feeling like you're going to opt out of talking with Hmong women. But if you do find yourself wanting to settle down with one, again, just reiterating again, have that conversation with her. We are in wedding season right now as we're recording. I don't know when this is going to go out, but I've gone to a couple weddings and I'm in I feel like we're at an age where a lot of my friends are getting married, and I've had conversations with some of these friends. Just, I'm excited, like, especially those who are in long-term relationships and they are intending on, the next step is to get married. And I'm nosy, and I get excited. So I'm like, oh my gosh, like, what do you guys have planned? Like, would you want a Hmong wedding? And that's something I do ask. And you never have to answer me, but I've had friends who, they want the whole thing. They want to go through with the hupli, with the, whole oneng, and then make sure that they go and do the actual Hmong wedding, or like the 3 full days, like the full process. Because some people just do the half day, 1 day, whatever, and then they'll follow up with the traditional Mika wedding. Some people don't want any of that. I was recently talking to an acquaintance about this actually, and she was like, I don't want any of that. I want just an American wedding. And between her and her partner, she was telling me how, yeah, we talked about it and we don't care for that. I'm like, if that's what makes you happy and you're content with that, the both of you, do that. I have talked about this previously, but just don't feel pressured for the both of you, you and your partner, to get yourself into a situation, especially this is your wedding. This is your commitment to one another. And yes, family members matter too. But it is going to be more so about you and your partner. One advice that I learned later in life that I wish I'd thought about earlier is, I've always been someone who would focus on my family that I grew up with first. Because to me, it's like, these are the people who nourished me into the person I am today. But then as I gotten older, I was talking to an auntie and she's like, yes, you love your family, but prioritize your partner first. And I know everyone's going to have a different perspective on this. This is something that recently changed for me. It doesn't mean that you don't love your family, but she was like, someday, like, you may have sisters, you may have brothers, you have your parents, but your parents have each other. Your siblings, they're going to have their own partners, and they're going to create their own life, and they're going to have their own story. And if you're not investing into you and your partner first, how are you going to be able to invest into them? So I feel that if you're with someone you guys are equally pouring into each other, you'll be able to have this conversation and be able to find like a midpoint on this. The traditional wedding itself, let's say you did end up with someone who really wanted this and you're trying to figure out how to go about it. I think the Hmong community has changed a lot today in this world. And I say that because I've had friends who were in very similar situations. Not everybody has both parents in their life. And I honestly feel it's Hmong weddings, to me personally, they're not as like, there's no actual written like it has to be this way, even though they say that but when you start to talk to them, you start to realize that if they know each other or they like you, whatever, they'll make it easy.
Yeah.
So when I got married, it was easy breezy, lemon squeezy, because when his family came to our door and the door opened and they realized who was talking to each other, like, oh my God. So like, it's like, okay, well, So now they're buddy buddies. It's like, okay, like how cut know because so they're just like doing it for formality, but it's not like they're having some kind of a business meeting as someone who doesn't know each other. And I feel that if you're a good person and let's say you are able to connect with them, but I'm sure they'll be more than understanding, especially if they also love and care about their daughter and she feels like this isn't a big deal. Y'all will work something out. It's not, I personally feel that rigid. And if they make it that rigid, what Emily said earlier, is this really a family you want to put yourself into?
Yeah, I mean, I think reading off of this, it was really, you mentioned that you'd never dated a Hmong person, and I think that's a-okay, but I think that's one of the thoughts that I had earlier in my like dating years too, is like, if I do date out of my race, like what certain aspects will I be putting into our wedding and what kind of wedding do I envision for us? And so I'm in an interracial relationship now, and we won't be doing a full Hmong wedding, and I don't really feel the need for it, but that's our decision. And it's interesting because you mentioned just the idea of Hmong women, but if you dated outside of our race already, like what did those conversations already look like for you, right? And so regardless of if you date Hmong or another person, like I think it is important to talk about like what do you see, what certain parts or what do you envision for both of you or just even for yourself moving forward. And I think one really hard thing that I have had to wrap my head around is that if you really decide you don't want a traditional wedding, you have to be okay with the fact that like not everyone's going to agree with your decision, but they'll have to respect it. Because regardless of what kind of wedding you want, you can't please everyone. And at the end of the day, you two are getting married and you have to be the one paying for the wedding. So just putting that out there, like, yeah, I'm wondering how you navigated those like conversations in the past.
Yeah, because even if you think about like an American wedding, that's a traditional wedding too. It's just not a Hmong wedding.
Yeah.
And so, a wedding regardless is a tradition that has been carried on. So do you even want to have a wedding? I know I don't. Like, I'm okay with just going to the courthouse and being like, here's our marriage license. And so even having that conversation of, do you want to have a big wedding where people come and like celebrate you with you, that's a conversation. And then the next step is, okay, well, do we want to then incorporate our cultures into that? So you two make really good points about that. So again, right, it's your marriage, and how do you want to celebrate it? How do you want people to celebrate it with you? I know like some people like having weddings because they like to have their family there to celebrate it with them, and that's a really important part for them. And other people like to have it as a private moment and then share it later. So it's what do you really want to do? And I think that you shouldn't pressure yourself, especially since you're not dating a Hmong girl right now. When you get to that point, you get to that point. I think it's great that you're thinking about it now. But I think that we are constantly evolving our mindsets as a culture. And this is coming from someone who, again, was known as a Hmong hater in the family. And I just had a really great conversation with my dad. And I think another part about like the Hmong culture, or cultural Hmong weddings, is that they have like a certain role in the wedding that some elders play, where they are the ones, I forget what the title is. They're the ones that, no, I forget what the title is called, but he's the one where he's like, basically like, I'm going to be the one, like if the couple has issues when it comes to like divorce proceedings, then I will be the one there to like hold the guy accountable for why he didn't like keep his promise to, my daughter or my niece. I forget what that title is called.
What you're talking. I don't remember, but I remember for when I got married, long story short, because as for my wedding, we both were to stand there so that I knew that if something were to happen, this is who I was going to.
Yeah.
And I don't remember what they had like Nulumpe title was.
Yeah.
But I just knew that usually it's like someone that your parents feels trusted.
Exactly.
And
so having a traditional Hmong wedding, you also have to understand that it's a community, right? And so do you want the community involved in your marriage when you have issues like that too? And so that's something that you have to consider. And again, I don't think that you should fret yourself right now with it, especially since you're not dating a Hmong woman, and if you don't think you ever will. If it's something that your future partner, you're concerned about them being involved in your culture, I think you let parts of it in that you want. And if you don't want a traditional Hmong wedding in the future as a Hmong man, then you don't want that. So
I just love to reiterate that maybe they don't even want a wedding. As Emily said, they might just want to go to the courthouse and like, let's just get our marriage paper in and call it a day, you know? And because I do have friends who are like that. It's like they've been together for so long and they're just like, no, we like things the way it is. And it's like, as long as they're happy, right? Because who am I to be like, oh, you guys should get married? Like, I'm not living with them. I have nothing to do with this relationship. But I do really want to push just the idea of really be sure about what you and your partner want, not what other people want for you. Because from my own personal experiences, this isn't necessarily what other people wanted for me, but I really threw out what I actually wanted. Convincing myself to believe that I didn't want all those things that convincing myself that I didn't want all that basically. Unlike Emily, I want a wedding. I would say I'm a more materialistic girl. Like, I like the beauty of it. I like being able to share it and being able to come into that and accept that as it is, I think has painted a bigger or better picture as to when I'm talking to a partner, being able to also understand, is this person going to be able to meet me halfway or meet me with this vision? And if you're talking to a girl and you feel like you'll never want to do that or never want to compromise or never want to figure it out, I again would suggest like having that conversation earlier on than, what if you're 5 years deep and then you're like, I'm not going to do that for you. Because I think it can be very heartbreaking. Like, yeah.
And I feel like that's a natural conversation too to have with someone who you're like honestly interested in, right? Because if you envision a future with someone who you've been dating for a year, like I think that's a pretty good like timeline of saying, yeah, like if we see this going any further, like what do you envision for us? And like what do you have in hopes of us having? So it'll come naturally. I feel like there's no need to like purposely push it, but it's a good conversation to have.
For sure. Thanks for submitting that. I think it's a really important conversation to start and have. So,
all right. So thank you guys so much for tuning in for this episode and for the submission for our Dear Hmong Woman spinoff here. And thank you again, Vang, for sending your story to us and trusting us with even providing you with any of our thoughts. I hope this was helpful to you. If anything, reach back out to us. You can submit a new form if anything else comes out. And for everyone else, same thing. Submit us a form if you have a similar situation or you would like advice or just be able to share your dilemma. This is the Hmong Woman podcast. Thank you so much. And you guys have a great day. Please make sure to like, comment, and subscribe.